All right. Welcome to this afternoon's edition of The Forum. I'm your host, Renee Pinnell. I'm the founder of Kaleidoscope, a community for creators and industry to come together to make rad stuff in VR and AR. And today we've got my buddy Brooks Brown, who's done a million things in our industry. I first became really aware of your work at Sundance year before last when you had... Hero, right? That's the name of the project?
Hero, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, full body, immersive thing where you actually, I don't even describe it because I'll let you describe it better than me, but it was one of the first sort of full body immersion. You're wearing a backpack, you're going through like this terrain, you've got live performance aspects in it. Really impactful. I think in a lot of ways it was the most innovative work at Sundance that year. And then we've talked a couple times in the ensuing years, and really excited to get an update on what you're working on now. But I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you introduce yourself. Who are you?
Well, hello. As you said, my name is Brooks. I've been doing VR for four-ish years now. Prior to that, I was working for James Cameron on the upcoming Avatar films, and then prior to that, I did marketing and some game development at Lucasfilm and LucasArts. So I have my thing specifically has always been, how do I play with people's interactions, people's emotions inside of the digital space? How do I enable that as an underlying thing? And early on, that meant web and social media. And then from there, it kind of pushed into game development, which, as the world of interactive and everything changed, it enabled us to do a lot more things when it came to playing with emotions, playing with people, and messing with, I think, what was the very standard video gamey world of, cool, I shoot things, I do stuff, and now there's a lot more inside of that. And then as VR was kicking off, Oculus had done their Kickstarter, and it was supposedly going to become a thing. I think you and I have had long conversations about my general cynicism around VR as a general business, despite loving the art form. When I left working for Avatar, Starbreeze hit me up and they said, we've got our own headset. We've got a bunch of stuff we want to do. We want you to head it all up. And it was difficult for me to refuse because that do anything you want thing is something I'd had the desire for a long time. And it meant I could do really stupid shit. Stuff. VR was a thing that no one really understood. So a lot of the early stuff was, we're going to put you on a roller coaster, which is cool, but it's, that's the early days. So what is the thing that makes VR? And that here's a budget, do whatever you want mentality is the reason we ended up actually with Hero. I've got a long story behind that, but that's the short version behind everything.
Why don't we take a moment then and describe, because Hero in a lot of ways I feel like was Starbreeze did a lot of different content, but that was the one that I feel like, at least in my world, was the breakout title. That was the one that I think of whenever I think of any of the stuff that Starbreeze did. Maybe describe it to people.
Yeah,
what it was, how it came to be.
The story of how it came to be is interesting. I have a personal relationship with trauma. I was a student at Columbine High School, and so one of the things that sort of became this underlying thing with me is playing with people's emotions and having them experience stuff they wouldn't otherwise. I have a belief that helps you gain empathy, understanding of trauma, things like that. And so I'd give talks all the time on VR. I think that's actually where we first met, was a talks or panel, even though I don't think we actually crossed paths directly then, where I'd go on stage just like all of us and I'd say, oh, VR is an empathy machine. Emotion engine, I think, is the awful fucking terminology I use. But everyone
I actually like that, emotion engine. That's good.
Everyone had their marketing-y spins on it.
Yeah.
But then I'd leave that and I'd go, John Wick is a great little VR game, but you were just shooting dudes in the head a lot. And so the idea that I would say this and then go work on things that were hardly related to emotion, over time got a little old with me. So I told my team I wanted pitches that were unusual. I wanted teams that could do something different. I think I told my producer I wanted to ruin someone's day, I think is how I put it. And he brought this amazing developer Inc. stories out of New York, Naveed Kansari, and his wife and their team are this exceptionally hyper political group. They had done a piece that I had known about. It's how I knew I wanted to work with them. They'd done this piece called 1979 Revolution about the Iranian Revolution, which is a personal story for Naveed and his group.
But just through the link in the chat log, so everyone can check out their work. They worked on Grand Theft Auto before, so they sort of have that video game background.
Naveed's thing specifically, and I mean, Naveed's got a lot of things, so I don't want to pigeonhole him, but his understanding of cinematics and how stories are told inside of that art form. It's not the interactive part necessarily. It was a lot of the storytelling, blending the interactive with a pre-rendered setup, and his understanding of motion capture and getting performances and all that. It obviously didn't go to waste on Hero. It's exceptional work. So when he came and he said, we've got this idea, we want to do a thing where you watch a girl go down the street of Syria, we blow her up, and it's like, that's great. And we said, I was like, well, what if I want you to be the thing to blow up? And we started having this new discussion where it's like, what is it that we can use to push VR further? A lot of VR stuff in the film circuit world, or even downloadable, was very much almost like being part of a diorama or seeing a diorama, but it wasn't really something that truly impacted you directly as the subject. So we began work and thinking about how we wanted to do it. We went a bit overboard in our early ideas, wanting to make it 2 stories and use an infinity ladder, and we went a little nuts. And we ended up scaling it back. And where we landed is basically a 30 by 30 set of rooms. It's 3 total rooms that are interconnected, backpacked VR experience with everything fully built out. The idea being that when someone is inside of the piece, they should be able to feel like they're inside of the piece. We played with humidity, we played with smells, we got oud we could burn. The textures on the walls were the textures you saw. We worked with DTS to build a 32 speaker object-oriented sound system around Unreal.
So super critical. You don't have headphones on, but you get the immersive
it's
audio.
One of the things, no matter how good headphones can be, and I spend a fortune on them. These are not, I like audio. I'm a sucker for it. But the reality is that audio, it can't replicate real audio as it bounces off walls and that flavor around everything that happens. So we knew we wanted to get rid of headphones. We had a bunch of stuff we wanted to do. We wanted to really blow you up. So we had, I think, 3 17-inch subwoofers that fired. We had a pneumatic floor. We hit you with 2 jury-rigged leaf blowers that we had filled with rice husks that we smash into your face when the ash hits you. We did a lot of really amazing, it's an extraordinary team. And at the same time that all of this is physically happening around you, the Ink Stories team had gone out and they'd found Syrian refugees actually here in the States that they could put through performance capture. We get their audio, we get their physical looks, the way that they act. We got fortunate enough, the dad in the piece is actually an acting coach. So he was able to also, on top of that, help everyone else and help, I think, a lot of that authenticity. Ink Stories, if I could pin one thing on there, just ridiculous, that is this level of detail of understanding the story world a person's in and making it authentic. So when you're there, the signs in the window for the market are the correct language, shape, size, general semiotics you'd see inside of Syria versus, something down the street. So that...
Well, just to pause maybe because I want to...
I have a video if you want to pop through it real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we can give that a shot.
Okay. Pull it up on a browser, and then if you hover on your video image in here, there'll be a little icon of a laptop. You got it.
All right.
Well, we'll just watch the video then. I don't need to ask what I'm going to see.
You should be able to hear it, by the way. Can you?
Yeah, and I'm going to make it big because you're big right now, but we want the video big. Here we go. It is big. I should be hearing it, but I'm not. So maybe narrate what we're...
Oh, no. I'm terrible at narrating this. I'm going to reshare 2 seconds. It every time does this. It's fascinating. Every sharing program does their own little thing. That's whatever. I'll narrate it. We'll pop it back through. this is actually what it looked like to go through the piece. A few moments in, you actually experience a barrel bomb in this market. As I said, we physically hit you with everything. At the same time, we're virtually hitting you. And around you, people are killed and they scatter. Our friends at DTS had been spending a lot of time working on what are they going to do in VR and how's it going to work. And we said, well, what about this? We want to really drive the entire experience around being there and how it feels to literally go through that thing that is happening moment to moment. There's me in my Tide Hunter sweater, if anyone's a Dota player. You don't think about how stupid you look in some of these interviews until you see yourself about 50 times.
No, I think it's like the best sweater you could possibly be wearing.
I'm glad. And we had Thea here, Sinclair, who you just saw. We're basically in charge of building the setup. And as you can see, everything very much matches one-to-one. We would bring a tire in. We'd work with Ink Stories to get the tire exactly right, make sure we have the right size tire. The props and everything having to be the right texture, the right setup, because there's this underlying, I have a theory around VR, or I'm sure someone else has a better name for it and it's less theory and more critical fact. But when you put people inside of virtual reality, I call it give a mouse a cookie syndrome. They do the same thing my toddler does, which is he tries to push the world and see how the world reacts.
Yeah.
And if they push something that doesn't react, then they're out. They know it's fake on a specifically conscious level through all the rest of their actions.
Yep.
And so for us, the number one thing we needed to go through, and it was a tiring thing to go through, was to actually make it so as everything happened, there was no moment you could break off. As you went through it, and a number of people everyone who went through it, we didn't have a single person otherwise, you lose yourself. And we very intentionally designed it that way. So you're at no point going cynically, oh, I'm inside of this piece, all the way to the very ending where after the explosion, you can go through a burning section of a kitchen, through a blown out back wall as a little girl is screaming, I'm buried, please help me, her father. And we actually have an actress there.
You can see it right there.
And it is an awful moment. It's just an awful, the reaction in this moment of just absolutely being destroyed.
Well, because you reach through and you actually feel a person's hand, but you're unable to help.
Her arm, and she helps you find the place you need to lift in order to save her life. And when you do, her father thanks. And then we had an entire presentation process around the whole thing. So we spent months setting this up. We'll skip watching Dragon's Den clips. But I do want to just share my favorite reaction. I filmed the first person who went through, and it was one of the most flattering things. She was a documentary maker, I believe, who had actually done a piece on Syria and the war there. So it's less impressive without audio, sadly. But you can actually see her seeing the father, seeing the daughter, and everything matches perfectly. It's just this weird thing, and she just bursts into tears. And it was a pretty consistent reaction, this deeply emotional, personally affected. So a lot of people had to sit down.
You can see her crying there.
Here she starts literally bawling, and it's overwhelming to watch. We didn't realize how much it was. We had one of the gentlemen who worked at Sundance actually was quite upset and said he needed to take time to decide if we should be allowed to do this because it was so personally impacting for him. And that was the intention, is to build that and to go through that at a deep emotional level. Because again, all of us who are in VR, we want it to be more.
Oops. Brooks, where did you go? Sorry, guys. I think Brooks' feed dropped for a moment. Let's see if we can get him back in.
Hello.
Hey, buddy. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
I probably clicked something. But so the underlying thing is VR. All of us want to do something powerful with it, and I think we see the underlying new medium that it presents. And Hero was my team's way, and Ink Story's way, and DTS's way. Everyone who is involved is beyond proud of it, of saying, here's the next thing. This is this is what we see as the future of emotional storytelling, and how we can do
and the
more.
key to that is obviously part of it is the subject matter you chose, but also this full body immersion thing.
Yes, and it's treating the subject who's inside of VR. And I know we had the longest time. Feel free to tell me if there's an answer. What is the person inside of the headset called? Experiencer is like the shittiest name we can come up with.
Yeah, it's not a viewer.
No, what they are is the subject. Like they are a subject, and they are within your bounds. They're within your world, within your control.
It's almost like they're the guest. I mean, I would lift that from Westworld. I've been thinking of them as guests.
Yes,
they're guests in the story world that you're creating.
But as the subject, the ability to give them that agency inside of the storytelling medium that you've chosen is what allows that power. And so the entire time you're inside of our experience, at no point are we saying, go over here, do this. There's no directing arrows. There's no ghost feet to go. We use some tricks sort of to help propel you and know where to go next. But at no point are we saying, even through the general symbology inside of games, here's where you go next. Here's the answer. It's all very open. So as we sort of got into that, we really wanted to enable people to have their own experience. And so you going through it is drastically different. We had one gentleman who, when the explosion happened, he didn't go anywhere. Afterwards, we had a long conversation. He was depressed because he realized, and he said, he realized that he's the kind of person who, after making so many documentaries, just knows to stand and watch. He's trained himself mentally, and he felt like a coward, is what he said.
Interesting.
Which is a drastically different experience than I think you. I'm not going to tell what your experience was, but everyone had their own. And
well, for me, the parts that, I mean, one of the moments that stood out to me the most was such a subtle thing, but it was so effective. And you saw it in some of the videos where so explosion happens, you enter a building, and then the building is part of the floor is broken off, and there's this big drop. And you are normally on like a flat level ground, but you had like a beveled edge to the platform. And I slightly stepped off of that, and that pulled me into that reality so much more. Just having that subtle detail of the floor actually being uneven, where you saw the break in the floor in the virtual world, and stumbling a little bit, like I was going to fall off that edge, was tremendously effective.
And it was. I mean, throughout the entire thing, I mean, you could go back. Specifically, that was inspired by Rusty's Plank. Because we've all done Plank Challenge. And we've all done all these things that we know. Like when I do Plank Challenge, I call it the Neo test. Like, can I, my eyes are open, can I step off the edge? And it takes a significant amount of personal power to be able to do that, like to convince myself. And so we used that and all of these other tricks that had kind of been come along in order to play with people on the explosions. The floor actually shoots up a good couple inches, which is again an awful feeling. Like being able to make a person not know that they're safe despite being safe, and playing in that sort of no man's land where that's a fuzzy answer. Am I safe? Yes. We don't know. And of course you're safe the whole time. You're actually like this far off the ground.
Well, you're physically safe, but psychologically,
we ended up, we had a few people go through who were part of a college. They were doing tests in VR, and they wanted to see what we were doing. And they coined this term that I really like, or I did, or someone else did while we were at Sundance, called safe trauma, where you're not literally living through trauma, because trauma is such a difficult thing to sort of put, but you're not actually in danger at any point. You're totally safe, and you know you're totally safe. We did not have anyone who, when the explosion happened, they jumped and they ran as fast as they could. Like they knew generally they're good. However, emotionally and their psychological side, they experienced some minute level of trauma when they went through it. So I don't have an answer for what that is, but it's a thing I've been playing with even ever since, about that fuzzy space that VR allows us to play inside of. It's really unique.
Well, and especially people that have gone through real traumatic experiences, simple, like little minute things can be triggers for that. But so then when you're having a full body immersion thing like that,
and when you go through, when you have and suffer from PTSD, and I've been doing it for a long time, when you go and the first thing they try to do is they try to have you relive it, which you can't. Like, you relive it every day, and it's photos or video do not do anything for you because you're just possessed. It's a mediated thing. It's through a photo. But actually going through this explosion, it's the screams and other things became massive triggering for me, but not in a way that I expected. And it wasn't just me. We had a couple soldiers go through who had been in Afghanistan, who had been in Iraq, and they talked about it as well. That it hit them in a way that was different. It wasn't like reliving it, but it felt safer. Again, places we don't have the answers for, but a place that I think is exceptionally powerful to play in.
So you guys did this in 2018, the beginning. January is when it premiered at Sundance. Where else did it screen? And walk me through what you've been up to since then.
Well, we ended up taking it to Tribeca, and I actually left Starbreeze the following week. We won Tribeca, which is fantastic. We were really excited to win the story group there. We were up against some amazing pieces, and to hear them say that the jury at Tribeca said it's the future of the medium, which it's a ridiculous feeling. I've never had any film premieres or anything. I've always been in games. We don't do this. Yeah. So it was this weird, Sundance, Tribeca. And then we went on and we won a Lumiere also for immersive VR of the year. So we won a handful of awards, and I left Starbreeze because I had let the bosses know I was kind of fried. I had spent 3.5 months in Dubai living there, setting up a VR park on behalf of the company. And I missed the first 4 months of my son's life.
Yeah, we talked about that at Sundance because both of us had little kids, and I was about to have my little kid.
Yes.
I can't even imagine.
Out of 4 months, I'd seen him 3 weeks, which is, and I missed a lot of the really good early stuff. My wife's a saint for putting up with that and for being amazing about it. But I just was like, I'm in a place where I'm fortunate, but I do not want to miss this in my son's life. I don't want to spend another year killing myself at work. So I took time off, raised him, and spent a lot of time sort of figuring out what the next thing could be, sort of randomly. And VR is a unique thing to play inside of. It's a nice way of me saying that it's excessively difficult to find funding or to play inside of it at all. And you know this as someone who plays in that world.
Yeah,
there is the trough of disillusionment or whatever they say that thing is. We blew the floor out of that thing. The VR is very difficult right now, and it's been difficult for some time. I've done light consulting. The short version, light consulting, helping random people. Some companies currently is a wonderful studio in Ukraine I'm working with called Pingle that is trying to move. Companies are trying to put stuff out there, trying to figure out how do we do good VR? How do we do good interactive? How do we marry our game to an IP? Things like that I've been fortunate to be a part of. But the big thing for me is how do we bring back VR? How do we play in this space again in a powerful new way? And honestly, up until a few months ago, I was very, very near giving up on a lot of it, because finding that thing where you have the freedom to do something very unique and very different is tough.
It is hard. It is hard. And especially, we in the frothy hype cycle of 2015, 16, 17, there was a lot of money that was available for experiments because everyone was like, who the fuck knows? Let's put some money out for experiments. And, and that gave artists the space to do weird shit like Hero that had no commercial, path.
You can do Jack, which we were up against at Tribeca. Great piece.
Yeah, great piece.
There was a ton of stuff. Again, we were very lucky. And this year as well, from what I understand, Tribeca, it's amazing VR pieces. There's still stuff being made. But it doesn't have the year or two ago where anything. You have an idea, here's a bag of money, go produce it with a VFX crew who's $2,000 an hour.
It's gotten, it's shifted. And I feel like So I'm really curious about the fact that you said until 2 months ago, because I know I've been feeling this, I've been trying to feel out where ground truth is. Like, where's the ground, where's solid ground that you can build a foundation upon? And I've started to feel like I know where that is now. And I feel like my feet are planted on something that feels firm.
Well, I'll tell you, and this is not a sentence I probably would have said 2 years ago, but to me, it's thanks to Oculus and the Facebook guys. The number one problem that VR has is adoption. Yep. And the current adoption rates and the general demographic, I know who they are. They're my people. They're the guys who spend 2,000 hours in Dota or play Rust or play Onward for 10 to 15 hours a week. And you need to build content that is effectively systematically based so they can put in 1,000 hours into a $15 title. Yeah. That economics doesn't work in pretty much any other type of game besides shooters. It's very tough to build those. Even StarCraft, RTS games, these classic tropes. But in the world of story, that content's expensive, man.
Super expensive and not replayable, like you just said.
You can't do it a second time unless you're that guy, which I'm not, and most people aren't. In fact, most people, take a look through the Xbox Live achievements, PlayStation trophies, whatever. See how many people actually finish the games they buy. Most people don't. They're not big into finishing story games, but they'll put 1,000 hours into a multiplayer thing they really dig. So it's been tough because that's been the audience we had to build for in order to make money. And there's not a lot of them out there. It's 200,000. And then the Quest hit, and I mean, you know me, I'm a hardcore cynic. I kind of rolled my eyes and went, great, another headset. Woohoo, that's what we need. Turns out, no, it's actually what we need. The thing is phenomenal. It's my dad, my parents can put it on. It just runs, turns on.
It's the only headset I use now. Like, I have all of them, but like when I'm thinking like, oh man, I've got to go fire up that PC. I've got to close all my curtains if I'm using the Vive, so I don't have light fucking with the sensors.
If it weren't for development, I probably wouldn't put my Vive on almost at all anymore. I think there's just the sheer usability, the price point is getting there, but it shows a path forward that I was not expecting, which is that inside-out tracking can actually work. The headset can be single piece put on, and it can be that simple.
Yep.
And the simplicity is what makes it. There's no solid ground yet, but I think it was this moment where I'm like, okay, so if I build something for a slightly broader audience that'll bring people over to it,
for me,
isn't just a shooter, then I can actually say, oh, people might actually buy this for a newer experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the Quest was a huge watershed moment for me in terms of reaffirming my belief that VR is going to be a thing now, as opposed to, because like I never lost faith that it was going to be a thing eventually, but like in terms of
the question is in our lifetime. That was kind of where I was at. It's like
I wasn't there. I was like, is it going to be like 5 years from now? But it's still like, in the 5 to 10 year range for sure. It's a matter of like, is it going to be, a couple years later? Anyways, the Quest is just on the other side of that threshold of cost, convenience, quality, all those things. It's just on the right side of that break. And when I first got in this industry 5 years ago, I wrote down a list of all the stuff that I thought a VR headset would have to be mainstream. And the Quest checks the box on just about all of them. Yeah. I mean, you can nitpick. It's super underpowered. That's obviously something that is going to get better over time. It's still too heavy. If you're in there for a long time, it starts to get uncomfortable. There's a lot of like things that battery life, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to be in VR for 30 minutes, it's fantastic. Well, and that's where most people are
sitting and doing VR. You can be in it much longer. It's a lot of and this is I gave a talk at VRLA. What was it? I don't remember. One of those VR conferences. But my big point around the whole thing is that we've always allowed in VR, but generally this is true of technology, is that engineers are the thing that charge forward. They're the ones who create the first experiences, and then that defines the language of the platform. And VR is, I think, suffering from that more than almost anything, because the first people who built it were these core gamers who had done graphics pipelines and games for traditional games. The first thing that they did is they put traditional games on them. Things like Fallout VR became a thing, Doom VR, all of these games that are very gamey. They're intended to be played as if they're marathon sessions, the same way that I sit and I do a weekend where I'm Bloodborne or Sekiro, and I'll jam on that for 8 hours. And so games are designed in VR to do that. Or they're mobile developers, and so they're designed to be hyper burst 5-minute games.
Yep.
And that's neither one is actually what VR is. It's just that happens to be these guys who started. Thank you for breaking the ground. But now we've got to go, okay, so here's the form factor. This is becoming a thing where if a person sees me having a good time in this headset and generally knows what I'm doing, they're apt to actually go buy this. And I have confidence they'll actually be able to put the Quest on and have it work.
Yeah.
I used to joke when I moved into my new place, I had to pay one of our techs at Starbreeze because I couldn't get the friggin' Vive stations to work. Like I couldn't. And he's like, oh, he came in and it turned out there was this other thing from one of my TVs was spreading. I was like, that's a nightmare for me. And I'm only half dumb as shit. He was brilliant, and I had to hire a brilliant guy. My parents can't do that. The Quest, anywhere I'm at, I carry it with me, pop it on. I can do it real quick, play around for 20 minutes.
Well, and then you finally get like the ability to do everything from a seated or one of the things I'm like, this is an aside, but we need to have reclined or laying down experiences be one of the new standard positions.
I would agree.
When you get done with a long day at work, you want to go watch a movie, you're typically laying on the couch or on your bed, right? We need VR experiences that are in that same thing. But anyways, so the Quest works from everything from that all the way to massive warehouse scale things. Mm-hmm. It's super versatile.
No, and just to sort of harp on that, the number one use case for me, and I love Super Hot. I think I've
that's one of the best.
I play pretty regularly on my Quest. But the number one thing I actually enjoy doing with my Quest is there's a handful of I'll call passive experiences. Even I would consider Netflix one of those. It's legal in California. I get high as shit, and I pop it on and I watch and I enjoy sort of disappearing. It makes me reminds me of there's old pictures or that idea of in the 1970s, the guys who had the whole huge cans with the hi-fi, and they're listening to Rush or old prog rock and really disappearing into
the music. Yeah.
And it's like, that's what I'm doing. Just I'm doing it, with the Quest on my head.
What are the passive experiences that you do when you're super stoned?
Generally they're fractals and things that I've been playing with in Unreal, because to your point,
oh, that's cool.
Asking about the next step, what I see as the next thing, because for me, Hero was the next thing, and then it's okay. So here's the new use case. This is the new understanding of form factor and medium. Generally speaking, people are wanting a fairly passive experience inside of VR, and I don't mean fully passive. I mean fairly passive, and it's a difficult thing to discuss.
Yeah,
I make it akin to when people first got into Insta, Twitter, things like that. We post on occasion, but the vast majority of time spent on almost every social network is passive. You're reading and you're clicking like, retweeting, very simple, quick, spitting it out. What is the digestible ability for me to do that, but with other forms of content where I'm playing with music, I'm playing with podcasts. I've got Chapo Trap House is one of my favorites, and I'm able to sit there and have a Winamp style visualizer and just allow the audio to become this thing I disappear inside of is actually far more rewarding than I ever thought it was going to be. And again, the form factor and what people are looking for as you enable these semi-passive experiences with some active, and you start blending and finding that middle ground where it's not a 10-hour marathon game in order for me to rocket from point to point to point. It's not a 20-second burst game like Angry Birds where I put it on and I play for 2 or 3 minutes and I'm done. What's that middling experience where it's engaging, it's able to keep me there, but I'm able to sort of dive into different worlds as I see. And it's been a really fun place to play with. And the beauty of this, the other side I love, my Quest is a normal Quest. I don't have some crazy dev kit. I've got a home computer and I've got Unreal. And I'm able to build all kinds of fun, stupid shit just to toss through a few blueprints, see what I can do. And in about 4 or 5 hours, have a new little thing that happens or some stupid doodad that you can see if it works, and it plays with very rapidly.
Yeah.
And the communities built around it now are excessive. It's amazing how many people are. Well, I mean, you have 233 people. It's a lot of people watching us right now. A tip of the iceberg in terms of the people who are developing and trying to put together content, because it's so accessible.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So again, we talk about the things that make the Quest so powerful. I can put my little prototype on here, and I can take it to a meeting and throw it on a person's head and blow their mind and have them talk about, well, where can we take this? What partners can we work with? That as a workflow, it's something I've never had before.
So because of this affirmation in VR, we can count on you sticking around. You're not peacing out.
Not piecing out. No, I was never going to piece out. It's a question of whether or not I was just going to. I've gone back to some level of classic game development and and consulting on non-VR things. But VR is a new medium, and it's a place where no one knows what they're doing. And I've been told by multiple people that's the place where I tend to actually be the most excited, and they're probably right.
Yeah. I mean, well, that is the thing that's exciting and terrifying about it. Do you feel comfortable talking about what we talked about on the phone last time we spoke? I don't know if you remember what we talked about, but it involved food in VR.
Oh, yeah, there's a handful of, we want to talk about let's talk through some failures.
I like failures.
Failures are good. It's, I actually made a few enemies. I was on a panel and I was talking openly about how a thing I did screwed up, but I accidentally said someone else on the panel had screwed up.
Oh.
No one wants to talk about where the fuck ups are and where the problems are. So I was working with a chef friend of mine and this small financier. And the idea was, what can we do in terms of really bringing food to virtual reality? There's a lot of
like actual food that you'd be eating.
Actual food you can eat. How do we build it in a way that it can be tracked via Leap or by camera? Camera, by the way, much easier. Leap helps a bit. And then actually designing our own stupid fork. How can we make things that it changes what you're eating based on the smells, based on the look, based on the interactions you have around it? Simple version, in the headset you see a little dude, your Gulliver's Travel style, little guy runs along, he falls over into a fire and he roasts himself and you smell it. But what that is it's actually, we've just taken some meat glue and some chicken and we've just, made a little person, and it's fucked up, but you eat a little dude and it's hilarious. It's such a unique, weird
so the idea as you described it would be that you'd be going to like a 5-course, like amazing meal, but it has this narrative built into it where you're in a VR headset and the food that you see on your plate could be anything, like a little man that's animated, but that you would track it so you could actually eat it and sort of be telling this narrative throughout.
There's a handful of restaurants who really, really, really play in the space of experiential eating, which I'm a huge fan of. Personally, I'm a sucker for basically anytime someone says, oh, it's a 3-star Michelin, I'm like, great, I'm broke again for the fucking month because I have no choice but to eat there. And so one of the big things that they play with a lot, and I saw it from Dubai to Spain to Paris to New York, is how smell and sight affect how we feel about what we're eating. Yeah. And so we did some early explorations in playing. And again, we start getting into the same problem as anything. VR is VR. It's impossible to find funding in. The two challenges we found were, one, the technology consistently, how do I put it without being an ass? I have no experience with this with the Quest. Technology needs to be replaced every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month. Headsets go in and out. IMAX VR can tell you all about that. The Dubai place that we built can tell you all about that. VR arcades have a huge problem. It's their challenge.
As in the hardware physically breaks?
Physically breaks, stops working, the tracking stops running. And so the reliability is very limited. It's one of the reasons you just basically need to have tech on hand and you need to have technologists on hand, which is not...
That's expensive.
It is not cheap. And when you start getting into how do you get a cord to a person? How do you make it so that way if someone reacts poorly, you can get them out? There's all of those issues with just general setup. With a restaurant, you've got levels beyond that when you're talking about food safe plastics, when you're talking about how you actually keep everyone from rubbing their disgusting chicken human hands all over their headset and hitting each other with there's a lot of we'll say the tech's not quite there yet, but it was a really fun exploration. We've chatted with a few people. We're still having those conversations. That's
how far along did you get in the R&D for that project?
We got the demo I was describing.
Okay, so it was human that you'd
and it's easy. By the way, meat glue is the coolest thing I didn't know existed before it.
You said meat glue earlier. I wasn't sure if you if I misheard that.
If you Google it, it's I'm
meat glue.
Too stupid. It's a powder substance. Don't breathe it in, obviously. But when cooked with meat, it binds meat, and you can make like literally any meat stick to any other meat. It's it's super fun to play with.
Wow.
Yeah, you can make like a hot dog burger, and you can do all kinds. It's attached. It's pretty awesome.
Bizarre. All right, meat glue. So meat glue worked. You learned that, but the VR tech wasn't quite there. But I love that idea.
I still love the idea. I think, and when we're talking about that, we're talking about a lot of other pieces sort of came and went during that time. It's the big underlying challenge with running anything with VR is one throughput. Profit per square foot. It's number one thing.
Yeah.
Because when we're talking about location-based VR, which was what I was focused on for a long time, and it's something I've moved ish away from. I don't want to say away from completely, but ish.
I still believe it. I just haven't seen many people. I haven't seen anyone really crack the nut of it.
No, well, it's that profit per square foot that's the nightmare.
So hard. Yeah.
You have to have people come in at a certain rate. You have to have a charge for them at a certain amount, and you have to have repeat business. You have to have someone who's willing to stay there and pay. If it's hourly, like say old PC bangs in China, no one pays for an hour and leaves. People pay for hours and they stay there. You need to be able to build something that's the case for. Otherwise,
what was that reference you just said? Something in China?
PC bangs. PC internet cafes. They're called PC bangs.
PC bangs, got it.
Internet cafes couldn't survive if all people wanted to do was, I just came in to see it. That's fine. Bye. Which is essentially, VR. The number one reaction is about the same as if I have a card trick.
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool. That's it.
Yeah.
So we need. It's the challenge is we don't have the content. Then beyond that, we don't have actually the hardware that can really drive it. The Quest is the first time I think we're starting to see a lot more of that. And then on top of that, even further, is the ability to really work with people where they are at. We and the people watching this, we need to always remember that we are deep in a bubble, the world of virtual reality we understand and that we're aware of. If you're the kind of person who thinks that there is a difference between a Vive and a Quest, and I know there's a difference, my point is, if you immediately go, of course there's a difference, you're inside that bubble. Yeah. And that bubble is people who know these things. When we were doing, when we were in Dubai, we had a number of people come through as part of these early user testing. And the landowner, Omar, who's one of the largest building companies in the UAE, they put together one group that was specifically the hardcore gamers. And I think you could call them that. They were aware of the games we had put out. They played Payday. They had played a lot of Dota, League of Legends. They knew games. However, when we put them in the headset, we had one girl I will never forget. She was like, "Oh, cool." She was just staring forward. And I'm like, she's like, "What do I do?" I'm like, "Well, you pick up the gun." She's like, "Where are they?" I'm like, "Look down." And she said, "I am. It's black." It took me a second to realize.
She was just looking with her eyes.
She was looking down with her eyes. And I was like, no, the headset will follow you. And, like it just blew her mind that like she could move her head.
Yeah.
That's a level of usability and language that we need to overcome. And we can do that. The way that we did it is by selling a shit ton of them. My parents knew how to play Wii Bowling without ever having played it because of the commercials and because of the just general pop culture, attack that thing had. Or we can do it much more like 3D televisions and 3D movies, where it's just inevitable. We kind of know it. Eventually, you'll figure it out, and we just be explicit.
So what are you excited about next, man? What do you feel like what are you really pumped about that you see on the horizon?
Well, it's my predictions about the last year and a half were right. Everyone asked what they thought. Was it my last talk I gave? And I was like, oh, it's with any luck, we're going to see a year of the bubble popping. All the money's going to pull out of VR, which I still think is a good thing, even though it sucks for me and it sucks for a lot of people who are probably watching this. The reality is we need smart money who understands how to invest in this and who can bring business to it, rather than just people who are excited to be able to put VR on their hedge fund's name. That smart money is starting to come back, and they're really interested in doing things that are creative, that are pushing boundaries in some unique ways. And so when I talk about the Quest and I talk about some of the things I'm doing, they're starting to talk about what is that underlying thing that VR can do that's consistent. The way I would describe it is throw game consoles out the window. Let's go back 20 years. Computers as games as they exist today, it's one of the most prevalent way to play video games in the world. It's all over the place. If all I could do was play video games on them, no one would own a computer. It's just the reality. I probably would, a handful of us would, but if I couldn't also do email, if I could buy a PC, which is essentially what the consoles are, only the people who really want that game would do it. We don't have that game yet. In fact, we don't even understand what games are for our platform.
Well, I think Beat Saber was the first one. I know people that went out and bought a headset just for Beat Saber.
I think Beat Saber, I love Beat Saber. Beat Saber is Guitar Hero. It's a peripheral game. So it's the same reason people went out and they bought the guitar in order to play Guitar Hero. Not sure VR is necessarily it. I think it's good, but it's not part of that underlying, the way that a computer is used for mouse and keyboard control.
Sure.
YouTube, millions of other things that I do on it that are part of that overall experience. What is that for VR? And so the conversations I've been having are very focused on not necessarily games, not necessarily, more platform plays. How do you do something that gets people to do stuff that they'll come back daily, that they'll check in, that isn't exploitative? I'm really against generalized microtransactions that are predatory and the sort of loot box bullshit. But how do you do the underlying experience that people want to come back and check out, a Spotify or a YouTube, that people can be putting content on and playing around in that inside of VR that isn't just for a very, very tiny group? Tilt Brush is a great example. There's a million pieces on there and I adore it. I'm also the shittiest artist who might live. And so I'll look at once a month, maybe I'll check out Tilt Brush, I'll see what people have done, and then that's it for me. If there was other ways of me to ingest that content that wasn't so hyper-focused on a single demographic, I think that tends to be where a lot of the conversations I'm having are at, if that answers your question.
No, it does. Super on the same page. I want to open it up to anybody else that is on the line that might have a question. Don't be shy. Throw it in the chat log or raise your hand, and I'll loop you into the video chat so you can be on the show yourself. While I'm sort of doing housekeeping, I want to let people know about tomorrow's forum. Let me pull it up. This week we had a lot of really interesting people. Tomorrow I think is with Jesse. Oh no, that's on Wednesday. Who's tomorrow?
Tell Jesse he still needs to put out that article on Hero.
I will. Okay, so tomorrow we're taking the day off. We had someone from YouTube, but she rescheduled. So on Wednesday we have Jesse Damiani from VR Scout and Forbes. He's sort of our poet laureate of VR. Either Jesse or Kent probably own or deserve that title. And then some other rad people later in the week. Other things to be aware of. We've got a couple hours left in our co-production market that we're hosting in Vancouver. We've got a couple hours left before the submission deadline. Let me throw in the link to that. So at midnight, we cut off submissions for that. We got a question. What do you think Zizek would have to say about Hero?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I actually gave a talk, a TEDx talk. You can Google TEDx Brooks Brown. specifically about Zizek and his interpretation of the concept of event from his book Event. And I reference Hero throughout it. Hero hadn't come out yet, so I couldn't quite really talk about it. But my core belief in how VR truly affects people in a different way is because it's an unmediated experience. If we're using Zizek's concept of event, which is a thing that happens that changes my entire perception and ideology in a way that is a new lens to the past. The joke is there is two types of literature, pre-Kafka and post-Kafka. And that is pretty much the case. There's 3D movies, and then there's Avatar. And then since then, that's kind of that. It's an event. It's a thing that happens that changes previous understandings of everything in the lens. With VR, because you're in a very particular mental state, which I discussed earlier, it's unmediated, and everything that's happening to you is happening to you at a profoundly different level. And so because of that, we have the ability to actually insert actual moments into a person's life. I go through in the talk how these moments sort of pile up together throughout our whole life and become our generalized lens. But with VR, if we can make powerful enough moments, it changes how a person perceives their past and also their future. And it changes their core ideology. My dad is my example of this. I love my father to death. He is a right-leaning guy, as a lot of us from the Midwest have those parents. And I would say we don't agree on a lot politically. But post him going through Hero in the very early days, he didn't go through the full thing when it was done. He changed how we viewed Syria, and he started sending articles about things that were happening. And he's like, well, I just figured I should know more about it. And it was this, oh shit, that's not a thing that had happened before with me and my father. So the ability to really change how a person perceives or looks at the world is a very, very powerful thing. All mediums, all art has the ability to do it, but specifically VR, because it's unmediated, means that it's affecting me in a profoundly deeper way.
Great question and great answer.
They just sized Zizek's head right here, which is great. It's like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I love that poster is hovering right above your head. And he's got the bitchin' beard, kind of like you.
He has a far more spectacular beard, but he sniffles a lot more. I haven't done nearly enough of that.
And I like your new Vikings haircut. It's pretty
trying.
You're looking good.
It's called general laziness. When you don't have to go to work every day and you're kind of just randomly doing stuff, you get to be the crazy creative type. And so
I don't know that.
You get to just not care.
That deep undercut that takes some effort. You haven't just gone completely wild. You're trimming the sides.
My wife does it, which is great.
That is good.
Saves up work.
You should have just said you shave it with a battle axe, but your wife cuts it is a fine answer too. Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out, and I'm really pumped to see what projects you consult on and work on, and what comes to what flowers and grows.
Hopefully, in the next, we're looking at the next 2 months to be able to start announcing and talking about it.
Okay, well, when you do,
you'll get a sneak preview.
Yeah, share it with me first. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it? So they can reach out to you on Kaleidoscope, or they can send you a what?
You can send me an email, brooks@brooksishere.com.
You mind throwing that into the chat log just so people can see it?
And it's brooks@brooksishere.com. Extra points if you get the shitty reference I made a decade ago when I registered that stupid email. Reach out anytime. I don't have any social media. I have LinkedIn. Don't add me on LinkedIn. It's basically spam.
Yeah, I hate LinkedIn. It's the worst.
It's the only one I kept. Otherwise, I don't have social media.
Good for you. When did you make that decision?
Year and a half ago, year ago, year and a half ago, fully, I think. Twitter gone, Facebook gone, Insta gone, everything gone. It's been nice.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, it's the way.
How many followers do you have? Are you still relevant now that you don't have anybody following you on social?
I am deeply irrelevant, and I couldn't be happier.
Oh, I love it. No, I'm constantly. I was completely inactive in social media until very recently, when someone said, for a business, I need to like step it up. So I have re-engaged, but before then my wife was my filter for social media. I'd be like, just tell me if anything happens with our friends or family. And so I'd get like, at dinner time, she'd be like, oh yeah, this happened and that happened. So I was getting it through her, which is actually really nice. Like, I feel like if all of my social media could just be filtered through my wife, that would be my preferred way of taking
horrifying documentary I watched on the moderators of Facebook and what they go through. It's one of the things that sort of sent me off the deep end. It was like, I can't be part of this anymore.
Yeah. No, it's also, I definitely think it's rotten to the core. But
thank you
follow.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for taking the time, and keep me in the loop on the things that are brewing. And we'll see everybody on Wednesday. Taking tomorrow off. All right. Cheers, man.